Section 13 of the American Rivals of Sherlock Holmes. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Mary in Arkansas. The American Rivals of Sherlock Holmes. Section 13. The Cloudbursters by Francis Lynde. Part 1. It was an article in the news columns of the Brewster Morning Tribune which first called the attention of the Brewsterites and the Intermountain world in general to the plans and purposes of the Mesquite Valley Land and Irrigation Company. Connibel, a hard-working reporter on the Tribune, had been sent over to Angel's, the old headquarters of the Red Butte Western on the other side of the Timmenyanis, to get the story of three shooting affray which had localized itself in Pete Grimm's place, the one remaining Angelic saloon. Finding the barroom battle of little worth as a news story, and having time to kill between trains, Connibel had strolled up the gulch beyond the old copper mines and had stumbled upon the construction camp of the Mesquite Company. Being short of copy on the fight story, the reporter had written up the irrigation project, taking the general outlines from a foreman on the job, whose tongue he loosened with a handful of Brewster cigars. A big earth dam was in process of construction across the mouth of the rather precipitous valley of Mesquite Creek, and the mesa below, which to Connibel's unrural eye seemed to be a very Sahara of infertile desolation, was to be made to blossom like the rose. Kendall, managing editor of the Tribune, had run the story, partly because real news happened to be scarce at the moment, and partly out of sheer astonishment that an enterprise of the magnitude of the Mesquite project had not already flooded the country with the brass band publicity literature which is supposed to attract investors. That a land and irrigation company should actually wait until its dam was three-fourths completed before it began to advertise was a thing sufficiently curious to call for editorial comment. Why Editor Kendall did not comment on the news item as a matter of singular interest is a query which had its answer on the loggia porch of the Hotel Topaz in the evening of the day on which Connibel's write-up appeared. It was Kendall's regular habit to close his desk at 7 o'clock and to spend a leisurely hour over his dinner at the Topaz before settling down to his night's work. On the evening in question he had chanced to sit at table with Maxwell, the general superintendent of the railroad, and with Maxwell's friend and college classmate, Sprague. After dinner the three had gone out to the loggia porch to smoke, and it was the big chemistry expert who spoke of the Mesquite news story which had appeared that morning in the Tribune. "Yes," said the editor, "Connibel got onto that yesterday. I sent him over to Angel to write up a shooting scrape, and he had more time on his hands than he knew what to do with. We've all known, in a general way, that an Eastern company was doing something over there, but I had no idea that they'd got their dam pretty nearly done and were about ready to open up for business." "It's wildcat, pure and unadulterated," cut in the railroad man snappily. "What they are going to do to a lot of woolly investors will be good and plenty. That Mesquite Mesa land is just about as fertile as this street pavement here." Kendall was a dried-up little wisp of a man, with tired eyes and a face the color of old oak-tanned leather. "That is what you would think, that they are out there for the easy money," he agreed. "But there's something a little queer about it. They haven't advertised." "Not here," supplemented Maxwell. "It would be a trifle too rank. Everybody in the Timmanyani knows what that land is over in the edge of the Red Desert." "They haven't advertised anywhere, so far as I can ascertain," put in the editor quietly. "What is more, Jennings, who is the engineer in charge of the dam building, and who seems to be the only man in authority on the ground, came in this afternoon and raised sand with me for printing the news story. He said they were not exploiting the scheme here at all, that their money and their investors were all in the East, and they were asking no odds of the Brewster newspapers." "Bitter sort of devil, that fellow Jennings," was Maxwell's comment. But it was the big chemist who followed the main thread of the argument. "What reason did he give for making such an extraordinary break as that, Mr. Kendall?" "Oh, he had his reason, pat enough," rejoined the editor with his tired smile. "He said he realized that we have irrigated land of our own over here in the park, upon which we are anxious to get settlers, and that public sentiment there would naturally be against the Mesquite project. He asked, as a matter of fairness, that we simply let the desert project alone. He claimed that it had been financed without taking a dollar out of the Tomanani, so we could not argue that there were local investors to be protected. Umph! That argument cuts both ways. It's an admission that the Eastern investors might need protection, scoffed the railroad superintendent. Then he added, they certainly will if they expect to get any money back that they have been spending in Mesquite Valley. Why, Kendall, Mesquite Creek is bone dry half the year. And the other half? Inquired Sprague. It's a cloudburst proposition, like a good many of the foothills arroyos, Maxwell explained. Once, in a summer storm, I saw a wall of water 10 feet high come down that stream bed, tumbling 20-ton boulders in the thick of it as if they'd been brook pebbles. Then for a month, maybe, it would be merely a streak of dry sand. Perhaps they are counting upon storing the cloudburst water, commented Kendall dryly. Then, as he rose to go back to his work, as you say, Maxwell, it has all the earmarks of the wildcat, but so long as it doesn't stick its claws out at us, I suppose we haven't much excuse for butting in. Good night, gentlemen. Drop in on me when you're up my way. Always glad to see you. The two who remained on the hotel porch after the editor went away smoked in comradely silence for a time. The night was enchantingly fine, with a first quarter moon swinging low in a vault of velvety blackness, and a gentle breeze, fragrant with the breath of the mountain forest, creeping down upon the city from the backgrounding highlands. Across the plaza, and somewhere in the yard, behind the long 2-storied railroad headquarters building and station, a night crew was making up trains, and the clank and crash of coupling cars mingled with the rapid-fire exhaust of the switching engine. The big-bodied chemical expert was the first to break the companionable silence, asking a question which had reference to the epidemic of disaster and demoralization which had recently swept over Maxwell's railroad. "Well, how are things coming by this time, Dick? Are the men responding fairly well to that little circular letter, man-to-man appeal we concocted?" "They are, for a fact," was the hearty assurance. "I've never seen anything like it in railroading in all my knocking about. They've been coming in squads to fess up and take the pledge, and to assure me it's the water wagon for theirs from now on. By George, Calvin, it's the most mellowing experience I've ever had. It proves what you have always said, and what I've always wanted to believe, that the good in the mass definitely outweighs the bad, and that it will come to the front if only you know how to appeal to it." "That's right," averred the chemist. "It is the strong hope of the country that there is justice and fairness and sane common sense at the American bottom of us, if they can only get at it. I think you can call the booze fight and demoralization roundup a trouble past, and begin to look around you for the signs and symptoms of the next biff you're going to get." The stockily built little man, who stood as the railroad company's chief field officer in the far western fighting line, moved uneasily in his chair. "I have been hoping that there wasn't going to be any next time," he said, chewing thoughtfully upon his cigar. "I should hope with you, Dick, if we had been able, in any of the former scrimmages, to secure good, indubitable court evidence against the men who were backing those buccaneering raids on your securities. The one thing that big money fears today is the law. The law as the federal courts are likely to construe and administer it. But to obtain your day in court you've got to have evidence, and thus far we haven't been able to sweat out anything that would implicate the man or men higher up. Therefore you may continue to sleep on your arms, keeping a sharp eye out for surprises." "I guess that is pretty good advice," was the ready admission. "But it is rather difficult to put into practice, Calvin. There are 500 miles of this railroad, and my job of operating them is big enough to keep me busy without doing any detective stunts on the side." "I know," Sprague nodded reflectively, "and for that reason I've been halfway keeping an eye out for you myself." "You have? Don't tell me you've been finding more grief." Sprague threw away his outburned stub, and found and lighted a fresh cigar. "I don't want to pose as an alarmist," he offered at length, "but I'd like to dig a little deeper into this mesquite irrigation scheme. How much or little do you know about it?" "Next to nothing. About 2 months ago Jennings, the construction engineer, made application for the through handling from Copa of a trainload of machinery, tools, and camp outfit. He has to have the stuff delivered at the end of the old copper mine spur above Angel's. We put the